You're welcome back to the conversation in News Central Television. This is the program where we bring you up to speed with all the political happenings on the African continent. But let's begin today's conversation in New York, where President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has joined other world leaders to attend the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, which focuses on pressing global issues such as climate change, poverty, conflicts, and inequality. United Nations General Assembly's theme for this year is rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 agenda and its sustainable development goals, suggested President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as the head of ECOWAS, may touch upon the concerning issues of military coups in West Africa during his presentation. In an effort to prevent past embarrassment, President Tinubu has directed the exclusion of federal government officials lacking specific roles from attending the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Nevertheless, concerns linger about state governors who frequently travel with substantial delegations to meet the president in New York, potentially sidestepping this directive. Experts recommend that the size of the delegation should align with the specific committees and issues discussed at the United Nations. Joining me this evening for this discussion is Emmanuel Osemeka, Executive Director, Civil Society Center for Humanitarian Development Affairs. Joins us from the nation's capital, Abuja. And we also expect Chike Chude, a public affairs analyst, to join us from Lagos, Nigeria. Warm welcome to you, Emmanuel, and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Now, Emmanuel, how significant is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's upcoming address at the 78th United Nations General Assembly, given Nigeria's role in West Africa, and also he's wearing two hats at the moment as President of Nigeria and is also head of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS?
I lost you a bit there. I heard as much as.
Okay, I'll repeat. I'll take the liberty to repeat myself, Emmanuel. Sorry about the breaking transmission or connection. How significant is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's address, his upcoming address at the 78th United Nations General Assembly, given Nigeria's role in West Africa and his position as head of ECOWAS?
Oh, I mean, it's a speech that I believe a student of history and student of international relations in Nigeria and of course across the globe will really be interested in, given the fact that one, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is currently the chairman of ECOWAS, and he's a new president whose mandate is also still being contested at the Supreme Court of Nigeria. Is a president who became president with about 37% of the vote cast, and is a president who is doing so much to gain, national acceptance. Is a president who has taken certain decisions that, one way or the other, he's been made to walk back on. One case in point is the issue of the Niger coup. And of course, the ECOWAS position to invade Niger, which was first off their first decision before they walked back and decided to explore diplomatic possibilities. And currently, ECOWAS, and of course, as chaired by Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is exploring every possible diplomatic opportunities to see how to resolve the political impasse in Niger Republic. So it'll be quite interesting to see how he's going to deliver his agenda for ECOWAS, and of course with the myriad of coup plotting going on across Africa. I mean, there's this stories making the round, which also, although have been denied, about Congo, So there's a whole lot. The economic situation in Nigeria is also a major challenge, which I believe the president will be making every possible attempt to lure investors into Nigeria across agriculture, petroleum, gas and what have you. So it's going to be quite an interesting speech, to get. I think the last time we had a wonderful speech, in my personal view, was during President Olusegun Obasanjo and of course President Yar'Adua, of
At
blessed
the United
memory.
Nations. Yeah. Thank you very
Yes, at
much,
the United
Emmanuel.
Nations.
And of course, News Central will be broadcasting Mr. President's address at the United Nations General Assembly live, which is expected to take place tomorrow, Tuesday, the 19th of September. Now, I'd like to bring in our second guest into the conversation, Achike Chude. Now, Achike, the theme of this year's United Nations General Assembly is about rebuilding trust and solidarity. What key issues or challenges do you expect Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to address in his speech, particularly concerning the West African sub-region?
With Africa's problem and West Africa's problem. We cannot talk about climate change in isolation of Africa, West Africa. So climate change remains a problem. Of course, we are all aware about the problem of desertification, especially the Sahel region of West Africa. And that, in a way, has also been responsible for the farmers' herders' clashes, as people that are heavily affected by drought move inwards to more luxuriant vegetation. So that in itself has brought about issues. And of course, other problems of climate, we are talking about flooding in many parts of the world, the kind of flooding that we have seen in Egypt of recent times. And then Nigeria has also had its fair share of flooding. So climate change and the repercussions of climate change is also part of the problem. And of course, there is also the issue of political instability, insecurity in West Africa, which is within the purview of the president as a leader of ECOWAS, and how nations can respond to that. Of course, we knew a very long time ago that terrorism is not it's not limited to national boundaries, it is international. With terrorists operating with one another across borders. And so the international community has also responded, trying to link up different countries in the battle against terrorism. So the issue of insecurity definitely will be on the table, as well as, of course, there are other related issues, which is, I think, the Secretary General of the United Nations talked about this, and this have to affect less endowed countries, like the countries of West Africa. We talked about the dire healthcare situation in education and in healthcare. And we talked about the lack of education in many parts of the world, especially in the vulnerable countries of the world, which Nigeria is a part of, and of course West Africa is a part of. So these are some of the issues that will have to be looked at, how you can have the kind of global solidarity that is needed to tackle these issues, especially with regards to countries that have, that are in serious economic crisis that would need greater international solidarity to tackle some of these issues.
Thank you very much, Chike. Now, Emmanuel, critics of the United Nations have dismissed the United Nations General Assembly as another talk shop. They say the United Nations is a very undemocratic organization. They point to people like Fela that sang in Beast of No Nation. What's united in the United Nations when you have veto power for the permanent members who make decisions that the other 100 plus members can't do anything about? So how do you respond to critics of the United Nations that, this is another talk shop and nothing tangible will come out of the United Nations General Assembly gathering?
Well, I mean, I believe Fela, as an activist at the time, had his reasons for, postulating, at the time that it was the UNGA is a talk shop. To a lot of people, the United Nations General Assembly is another talk shop that, has no binding responsibility on any government or any state, just like the United Nations, cannot even just wake up and, take a decision on a particular nation, as long as those nations are sovereign nations. There are a lot of crises across different parts of the world, and the United Nations has not really been able to assert its influence. I mean, because at best, that's what the United Nations has. What they have is significant influence over certain international activities, and the superpowers, the United Nations, the United States, France, Germany, UK, China, and of course Russia. They have they do have their vetoes, and they decide where this pendulum will swing, subject to their own interest. So one way or the other, from that aspect, you can say that Fela was right when he says that there's nothing united about United Nations. But if you look at it on the flip side, there is something significant about the United Nations, because one, in my personal view, I believe it is a place where nations gather to speak about the unity of their country, region, continent, and at best the unity of the entire globe. It is a place that you can explore the possibilities of marketing your nation economically and otherwise. It is also a place where I see it as a marketplace where a lot of non-state actors, civil society organizations go in to explore potential partnerships in different areas, just like my brother Chiketu, they talked about climate change and all that. If you take a look at Lagos yesterday, or the day before yesterday, the downpour made a total mess of several areas. All of that you can attribute to climate change, but at the same time, you can also attribute it to challenges of human beings, because people, clog the drain, build on waterways, and government failure to ensure that the channels are free, during rainy season like this. So those are some of the things that I believe that, yes, the United Nations champions and also find a way to get member states to focus their developmental activities, using, of course, the SDGs today. Of course, in the past, it was the MDG. One of the things I love, about, like, for example, the Ondo State government, Oyo State government that is part of the delegation, is that if you look at the Sheyi Makinde's activities, you will see that a lot of his developmental strides is channeled, towards the developmental goals, just like the administration of Peter Obi did in Anambra State, and of course, if we go to Abia State today, they are doing
Alex
likewise.
Oti.
Enugu State, it's Alex Oti here. So the idea is for you to have an impactful administration, either for 4 years or for 8 years of 2 terms or 4 years, which 8 years. I believe what the United Nations has also done for a lot of political actors is to help them set a course and champion keep very easy, low-hanging fruit KPIs, key performance indicators, that will help them measure their level of impact on the people. That's why the Sustainable Development Goals are there. So in terms of education, you can see clearly what you need to do and how to get it done. Any state in Nigeria that focuses its developmental strides and infuses the element of the SDGs in it, or sees it from the prism of the SDGs, one way or the other, if you look critically, you see that they make a lot of impact, especially in the area of education, the area of access to health, and what have you. So I believe United Nations will serve its purpose. They may not be 100% perfect in all they are doing. Everybody must not accept what they do, but they play significant role. The United Nations agencies are across the globe supporting very poor communities. The impact and the success of that support is another conversation, but they are making their strides, they are making their efforts. The effort might not be acceptable to everyone, but the truth is, it is a United Nations, and I believe the UNGA is a platform for a whole lot of things beyond just a worthless talk shop, like some people will think.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. I'd like to bring in GK back into the conversation. Now, let's bring this back home. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has directed the restriction of government officials without specific roles from attending the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Some have commended this directive as a step towards reducing unnecessary expenses and delegations. I remember a friend told me a few years ago during the Jonathan administration that he did see a number of Nigerian governors at the Waldorf Astoria in New York, just by the elevator, almost falling over themselves in order to get the attention of the then President Goodluck Jonathan. And also, the second leg of my question is this. Some governors in Nigeria in the past have used the United Nations General Assembly as an opportunity to meet with the president abroad. How can the government maintain a balance between accommodating these meetings and also maintaining a lean delegation? And how should the government address this issue to ensure a more streamlined and cost-effective representation? How do we take this beyond the United Nations General Assembly and also to other international engagements? Because the government has asked Nigerians to tighten their belts, and they should also tighten their belts.
Yeah, well, I think it's a matter of political will. I think the first thing that you have to do is, first of all, knowledge, to be aware that we are in dire states in the country, that there's only so much that will better the economic state. And so you have to look for ways. You realize automatically that you have to look for ways to ensure that you bring down the expenses and necessary expenses down, because the country needs to save. And it is the basis on which the president, undertook a very unpopular issue. That is the issue of the removal of the fuel subsidy, because the argument is that the country can no longer sustain the payment of a subsidy, and that the money should be used for other developmental objectives of government. So that is what people have had to do that. Again, that has put the government under pressure. But when you say that, really, that you need to cut down the cost of government, people are also working to see whether they who run the government are living at the world. That is the truth. The cost of governance is still exceedingly very high. And you look at the corruption report, for instance, that shows that dozens, of parastatals, departments, and agencies of government are doing, carrying out overlapping responsibilities, that there is a need to streamline that. And somehow the past government, like Jonathan and Muhammad Buhari, in spite of their claims and their standing of the fact that the country needs to cut down expenses, continue. At last, the political will to do what was needed. Some people have attributed it to the fact that they need to defend political statement. That some of these things are used, to facilitate the interest of the politicians who have worked for the civilian, for the civilian administration to help during the election. And so the president has done well in terms of the decision to cut down on the number of personnel that are going on this important event. Of course, it's not a jamboree, but what we have seen in the past is that there's this carnival-like atmosphere surrounding some of these very similar events. And so it's a good one. But I think the president should move forward really when it comes back to the country to begin a dialogue, a discussion about how to cut down government expenditure in the area of the humongous, scandalous, abominable amounts of money, and that members of the political class, especially the elected political class, are going home with on a monthly basis. When the poverty in this country has reached about 105 million in multi-dimensional poverty. So there's a contradiction really in what the government says, and what they do. And so we hope that since the president has shown that he's conscious of the need at the level of government, federal executive level, to cut down, and he has shown it perhaps in a symbolic manner. Much more needs to be done. easy. But we will accept this that we have done. But much more needs to be done. And then we also hope that we can take that gospel to the rest of the governance sectors in the country. I'm talking about what happens, especially at the states with the government, the various subnational units in the country. And so it's not just about talk. Let's hope that we will be able to do much more. Otherwise we will just see this as purely symbolic.
Thank you, Achike. I would like to bring back Emmanuel into the conversation. Now, Emmanuel, it is United Nations General Assembly address, which will anticipate President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is expected to speak about the spread of military coups in West Africa. In your opinion, how crucial is this topic, and what actions can be taken at the international level to address this concern? Or is it more of a domestic issues to this African countries who have witnessed coups in the recent past?
I think basically beyond the speech or whatever the content of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's speech would be with regards to the political democratic governance in West Africa, howbeit with the recent challenges of incident coup and military takeover of government in currently about 6 or 7 West African states. I think it is very fundamental that first there is a need for every current democratically elected leadership across Africa, not just the West African states, to take a cursory look at, first of all, their style of governance. You've just had a conversation with Achike Tuesday right now regarding reducing cost of governance, and not just mounting that you're going to reduce cost of governance, but in actual fact, reducing it in its entirety. It is not practicable to say in a speech that you're going to reduce cost of governance, yet you are increasing the number of ministers appointed, which means that you're going to incur humongous amount of monies on the overhead of those ministers. It is not enough to say that, that the democratic rule in West Africa is currently challenged, whereas the elections that brought each and every member of the ECOWAS heads of government is very, very questionable. The latest is Gabon. If you take a look at what happened in Gabon, you will see that as much as the military takeovers are not what we want, but when you listen to the reasons and the happenings and take a look at the happenings, you will find it really difficult to fault the military juntas. You take a look at Mali, take a look at Niger, and you will see clearly, look at Niger, for example. Niger was selling their uranium at 80 cents per ton. But the military have come out and said, no more. We will sell at $200 per ton. So what it meant was that those who were exploiting uranium in Niger at the time were taking the uranium at 80 cents and selling at $200 per ton. That is rape. That is practical stealing of natural resources. It is important that the leadership across ECOWAS, across Africa, understand the importance of democratic rule. The elections must be a true reflection of the will, wishes, and aspirations of the people. Democracy, they say, is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, or however it is said. The reality is that if you take a look across Africa, there are too many seat-type leaders. Some, on the average, is 30 years and above. Does it mean that in the entire country, there are no other eggheads that can steer the ship of nation? So it is important that whatever the speech of President Muhammadu Buhari at the UNGA would be a reflection of the happenings in West Africa, he must also make sure that he speaks like a statesman, just like President Umar Musa Yar'Adua of blessed memory did in time past when he said that the election that brought him to office was generally flawed. Therefore, that his government was going to begin to embark on electoral reforms that will eventually reflect the wishes and aspirations of the people. And he did it with the West report.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I'd like to bring back Achike into the conversation before we wrap things up on this segment of the program. Now, Achike, finally, considering President Tinubu's speech and the composition of the delegation to the United Nations General Assembly, Nigerians these days are very result-oriented. They want to see what's the benefit of this, because the government has said they should tighten their belt and their better days are ahead. So, Achike, what outcomes or changes do you hope to see as a result of Nigeria's participation in the 78th United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York as we wrap up conversation?
Hopefully, they would if they listen carefully, especially the governors that accompanied me, they will see signs of statesmanship when other nations, other leaders step. And we hope that they replicate some of these efforts. The reality is that, unfortunately, we have not had for a very long time a political class that's patriotic and has shown enough patriotism and commitment to the nation state. And and that has been the bane of our country. So we need our political leadership that is fully aware of its responsibility, that understands the need for accountability and transparency, that also has imbibed the virtue of the rule of law. Takes a political elite and leadership that recognizes the fact that the people are supreme and that the people are in a position at all times to determine what happens to them, especially whenever they want to match their scorecards every 4 years, at the end of every 4 years. And so we hope that there will be something at the United Nations that will imbue them with a renewed sense of patriotism. Because they will see a lot of countries that have been able to work, whose leaders have been able to walk the talk, that have done well, fairly well. Then they should also go back and think deeply about the morals and which they find their own country. The deprivation, the economic inequality, the absence of the rule of law, a judicial system that is not exactly up to scratch, that they themselves are benefited from one way or the other, and a citizenry that is hungry for good government. So when people talk about the so-called dividends of democracy, the reality is that the citizens of this country have not exactly experienced that for decades, as since this country had independence. They should also ask themselves why their country blesses so much with myriads of riches, economic, natural and human, resource wealth, continues to wallow in poverty, and then they will realize that it is as a result of the failure of the political class of which they are among.
Thank you very much, Achike, for your submission. I'd like to say thank you to our distinguished guest, Emmanuel Osemeke, Executive Director, Civil Society Center for Humanitarian and Development Affairs, who joins us live from Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, and also Achike Chudo, Public Affairs Analyst, who joined us live from Lagos, Nigeria. It was a pleasure having you both join me today on the conversation. I do appreciate your insights and your contribution to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.